my favorite second period world history class of this year. How's it going? And how are you, Mr. Greeley? Good, thanks. And my name is Tom Lean. I want to welcome you to Crash Course World History 600 CE to 1450. Over the next 15-ish minutes, we will cover 850 years of our past. Hey, you great history who also finds time to be a handsome. Is this going to be on the test? Yes, me from the past. It will be. Right, Mr. Greeley? Right. Well, in order for you to all pass the AP exam, this is crucial information. You need to pay attention. We will begin with the Silk Road, the most famous of all trade routes throughout this time period. It was established by the Romans and then later reopened by the Mongols for them to trade and communicate throughout their entire empire. It ran from China across to the Middle East, so luxury items and necessities could travel across the Mediterranean Sea. Many luxury items moved across these roads, including a variety of spices and silk and all kinds of things. The Mongols conquered China, and there they discovered gunpowder. Gunpowder was a useful device that they used to conquer the rest of the world. And as they were conquering it with gunpowder, other nations learned that they could use it to their advantage. Another thing that spread throughout the Silk Road across the world was Buddhism. It started in India and spread its tentacles throughout the rest of the world. Black Plague was a horrendous disease that spread from China all the way to Europe. It wiped out over 2/3 of the European population, killing many laborers and artisans. This caused economic and social stress throughout the world. I guess you could say it was a dark time. Trans-Saharan trade was mostly between the Arabic people and local kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai from Africa. The Africans traded gold, ivory, and slaves for salts, horses, cloth, small manufactured goods. Islam had a heavy influence on the local African kingdoms along the trans-Saharan trade routes. This is clearly shown by Mansa Musa. He made his pilgrimage to Mecca, and he made it rain gold on them hoes. Constantinople was an important connection between the eastern trade routes of the Silk Road and the western trade routes of the Mediterranean Sea. It was the western anchor for the Trans-Eurasian trade routes partnerships and was a clearinghouse for many different nations in both the Middle East and Europe. They had a direct trade route to many nations. They received silk and porcelain from China, spices from India, carpets from Persia, wool from Europe, wood, hides, and slaves came from Russia. Byzantines bought some of these goods, but mostly Byzantine merchants would buy them and then sell them, either selling them directly or after adding to the value by adding little gems or manufacturing them further. Byzantium was such a powerhouse in the Mediterranean Sea area that their national currency, the Byzant, became an international currency used throughout all of Europe. Another important trading system in the world during this time period was the Mesoamerican Triple Alliance between Texcoco, Tlacopan, and Tenochtitlan. These ruling elites would take tribute from surrounding villages and use them in their trading alliance, creating an internal trading system. They exchanged jade, emeralds, skins, seashells, vanilla, and cocoa beans. Down in South America, particularly in the Andes, the Incans had a very extensive trade network. They had a set of roads that were over 9,000 miles long. Here, their trading was more along the lines of government-controlled trading. Individual merchants weren't allowed to trade. Everything was controlled by the government. Big Brother was watching. As the Chinese Empire expanded, they gained tributary nations that offered specialized goods. These specialized goods helped them expand their trade routes. Another thing that they did to expand their trade was create paper money, which standardized the currency throughout all of China and made it much easier to trade in all China. The Sultanate of Delhi was a Muslim empire in the 13th century. They really promoted Islaminity in that area. The Caliphate's empire promoted trade by introducing camels and caravans to the trans-Saharan trade routes. Muslim maritime merchants used inventions from other nations, including the compass, the astrolabe, and the lateen sail, to navigate their way across the Indian Ocean basin, expanding their trade routes. These technological innovations also helped the Vikings plunder European cities along the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Along with their knowledge of the ships, heavy seas, and the rivers around the area, they are able to reach Newfoundland and have a good time. More than just luxury goods traveled along these trade routes, the Polynesian people in the Pacific Islands traded many useful goods, including domesticated animals, agricultural products like taro, yams, sweet potatoes, and they traded fishing techniques. These trade routes linked Hawaii to Tahiti and the Marquesas Islands. Along these trade routes, the Tahitian language diffused throughout all the nations around there. Another example is the Bantu people. As they migrated throughout Africa and intermingled with the peoples in the deserts and rainforests of Africa, they brought them the knowledge of ironworking, specifically hoes, and herding, and passed it on to the peoples. They ousted the hunting and gathering techniques and replaced them with better methods to support larger populations. Another type of food, that diffused throughout Africa was the banana. It was a very important innovation and helped support many new people and created a population growth throughout this region. As the Muslim merchants traveled throughout sub-Saharan Africa, they introduced many new types of plants, including citrus fruits, the Asian rice, and sugarcane. These all greatly improved African nutrition. They also introduced cotton so they could start their textile production. But then again, cotton's not edible. And now, time for an open letter. Ha! 360. But first, for the secret compartment. Pizza. This was obviously an Italian invention. The beautiful crust, magnifico. It shows the cultural interactions between the Italians, pretty much everywhere because of the Italian city-states. Their trade traveled everywhere and cultural diffusion happened. And now, time for the open letter. Two pirates. Arr! As the Islamic empires grew and their economic power spread out across the land, Muslim merchants spread Islam throughout the trans-Saharan trade routes through West Africa and East Africa. As trade routes grew, more people spread out more, and this led to people like Marco Polo working for Kublai Khan in China, and he wrote about it for 17 years. Likewise, Ibn Battuta was a Moroccan scholar and a Muslim merchant who worked for the Sultan of Delhi. He helped early Islamic societies prosper in the Eastern Hemisphere. And that is how you be a man. Back in Mesoamerica, the Mexicas, or the Aztecs, as they're also known, as they conquered the surrounding communities, they brought with them many different traditions, including the calendar of 365 days, different gods like Quetzalcoatl, sacrifice rituals of bloodletting, and social hierarchies of warriors, priests, and peasants. Kaboom! With these new forms of government came the Italian city-states, the most prosperous being Milan, Venice, Florence, and Rome. To finance these city-states, they came up with a new form of taxation and they formed long-term bonds, which strengthened their authority with public affairs. Now, the city-states weren't exactly a new form of government, but the Italians revamped the old Greek system of city-states. And even far south of the Italian city-states were the Swahili states, which were developed in the 11th century and were thriving. Technological innovations increased agricultural productions in lots of places, including Mesoamerica. One said innovation was the use of chinampa farming. People along Lake Texcoco would drag muck from the bottom of the lake and put it on top, forming little mountains. From this, they could farm, unlike they could do earlier because all the area was wet and marshy. Another very important innovation in China was the champa rice. This rice was fast growing and drought resistant. It could produce not one, but 2 harvests in one single growing season. This rice led to a huge population surge and was given to the Chinese emperor as a kind of gift for the tribute from the Champa kingdom. Also within China during the Ming dynasty, a new form of porcelain was discovered. It was lighter and thinner, and when fired, it turned white so it could display the glazes much more beautifully than before. This type of porcelain was so widespread that instead of being called porcelain throughout the world, it was called chinaware. Textile manufacturing also gained a huge boom in India and China as more artisans created more products, and it was all of like a standard quality, higher standard quality than before. Also, cotton became very important to everybody. Another innovation that came about was the widespread use of iron and steel. It changed from low, personally owned forges to mass operations of smelting and forging. Many different factors changed the outcome of the urban areas. These urban areas declined. This was because of reasons like invasions, disease, the decline of agricultural production, and the Little Ice Age. Now, the Little Ice Age was a period of 500 years that started at 1000 CE. It led to shorter growing seasons and cooler temperatures. These shorter growing seasons led to widespread famine and starvation, with the latter having serious effects in the Norse settlements in Greenland. Like I said earlier, the bubonic plague killed many people in Western Europe. This led to a decline in urban areas and more rural areas becoming more developed. Another reason why was because the Byzantine Empire, which was helped by the framework left by the Romans, now began to decline. Also, in the Mediterranean area, there was just not good enough farming tools. They used wooden plows, which barely broke the surface and maybe disrupted a few weeds. These tools did not work well for the heavy, moist soils in northern Europe. After the decline of urban centers, the rise back to the top was helped by a variety of reasons. In the Ming Dynasty, for example, emperors promoted irrigation centers. They also promoted the production of manufactured goods, including porcelain and silk. These new trading productions helped to increase trade between Japan and China. Japan was united in a sort of conglomeration of the ancient family clan. They even created an exact replica of Chang'an and created this for their government's seat of power. In 794 CE, the Nara period fell, and they moved the capital to Heian, or modern-day Kyoto. This became known as the Han period, or the last period before the medieval time period, and before the upsurge of
Samurai Power!
After the Han power system fell, the Kamikaze clan took power. Since these nations were just figureheads, the real power fell to the Fujiwara clan. Now, Japanese dynasties lasted a whole of a heck lot longer than comparable ruling houses. Korea was much the same, having been subjugated by China for a while and having to pay tribute, just like every other East Asian nation. On that note, labor organizations began as social structures became more visible, like the tax-imposed governmental system in Western Europe, and guilds. A consequence of guilds was the fact that all the quality of the products were pretty much uniform. Prices and techniques were also standardized. Coerced labor in Japan nearly mirrored that of Europe. Lords owned the land, while serfs worked it, and knights or samurais protected it. On the same note of subjugation, patriarchy has persisted throughout all these time periods in societies. Women have always played a role beneath the men. Although, when Ibn Battuta visited West Africa and voyaged throughout Mali, he was amazed by the fact that the women there exercised so many liberties. They could talk to women besides their husbands, and they could wear loincloths, even though they proclaimed themselves devoutly Muslim. Even though they did experience a stereotypical women role in their societies, they had more freedom than in other countries. They could rise to power, and they were also honored for giving birth to the little babies with the cute little hands and the cute little hair. I don't know. Anyway, go women! Over in Japan, Japanese women were not allowed to get formal educations by their fathers and brothers. They could also neither read nor write, and if they could do these, it would be only the Japanese syllabic writing, and that wasn't even cool. It wasn't like the in thing to do. Also, there was many other forms of suppressive operations put out by the government and cultural insecurities in general. This was widespread throughout East Asia. As we've talked about earlier in the video about Islamic diffusion, you might think only Islam diffused throughout all the areas. But let me tell you a big something something around here. The same places that Islam diffused into, guess what? Christianity diffused into those places too. After the Battle of Talis in 751 CE, the Muslims learned how to create paper from the Chinese prisoners of war, or so the story goes, lost in translation, blah blah blah. The Crusades, though, they increased contact between Europe and the Islamic world, exchanging technology and ideas, such as their ideas of astronomy and science, and even their maritime trade innovations. Through this, Muslims heavily influenced European development. Okay, class. Now that concludes our crash course between our time periods that I may have escaped me at this moment. So good job for listening.
Nope.
And I hope you will pay attention for the rest of our incredibly exciting presentation.
No.
And so goodbye from me and Fred. I'd like to say thank you to a few special people. Julia Lee, script and offering a place to stay. Julie Eberhardt for contributions to the script. Aaron Cutts for contributions to the script and editing. Maura DeLudy for contributions to the script and being the camera woman. And thank you to Thomas Lane for being the main actor, devilishly handsome,